What if you make a mistake? Well, then make it right. He's gonna be more interested in how you handle the mistake. And here's the thing, you maybe didn't make a mistake, but don't argue it. When you interact with us in some capacity, we wanna make that experience all about you.
Joe Hamilton.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to All Dots Connected.
Thank you.
And actually a special episode of All Dots Connected because we're here in your headquarters.
That's right.
And before we did this, we just started here, but we had an opportunity to really walk around and get a feel for what you're building here. And it's pretty exciting to be able to see it all. We're going to get into a number of different things, and we've had fun chatting a variety of different areas because you guys have built something that's founded on a set of principles and values at its core.
Right.
And you figured out how to take that and make it into a really successful business and scale using that as a foundation, which I think a lot of us aspire to and very few can actually pull off. So we're really looking forward to having this conversation today. But a place I want to start is one of the things that you started with and wasn't obvious to begin with, but turned out to be an embodiment of that, of these values. And that's your VIP warranty. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you nailed it. So I would be remiss if I didn't say, my dad knew that. It was really important, who founded our company. But he's more stoic and lead by example, so it's something I had to learn. But our VIP warranty, it is for very important people, but it actually stands for very important promise. So the promise is that we're gonna repair or replace anything that happens to your optic for free. So you don't need a warranty card to fill out, no receipt, no box to hang on to. You can even just have pieces of it, and we're gonna warranty, and we're gonna do that really quick. So I think our turnaround time goal is less than 5 days. So it's not only are we gonna do it, there's no red tape, it's gonna be fast. But to your point, and to what we've talked about before, in the early 2000s when I was just getting started in the business and we were starting Vortex, I wanted everybody to choose our product because of the quality of the optics, and I wanted them to think so highly of it. I didn't want them thinking of the warranty. And so, if I can, I'll tell a story about.
Yeah, please.
So I went to a deer and turkey show, which was down in Champaign, Illinois. There's a deer and turkey circuit of shows in the Midwest, and we didn't have dealers at the time. So we would go down and we would actually sell out of the booth. Once we started to get dealers, we would support them and then they would sell. So I was down there and we didn't have many people even in the company. So my wife she's helping me sell in the booth. And about halfway through the show, and you have to know this, is that my wife is just running support. I'm the professional sales guy. But she is kicking my butt from a sales perspective halfway through the show, okay? And that's, chapping me a little bit. So I turn to her finally and I say, hey, honey, what's going on? You're kicking my butt with this, the sales.
Right.
And she says, well, here's the thing. She says, you just keep talking about features and benefits, and I just keep mentioning about the VIP warranty. She doesn't know the features and benefits. Okay, she kind of knows the eye cups go up and, basically how to get it on your face, the binoculars, but outside of that, so she's just talking about the VIP warranty. Now, she's a lot better looking than me, but that really wasn't the thing that was doing the sales. It was this VIP warranty. But I didn't want that to be it. And so I kind of just sloughed it off. I said, but I don't want them thinking the product's gonna break because we really do make good stuff. And she said, okay, well, just, but I'm gonna keep doing it and I'm gonna keep, doubling your sales. So a couple weeks later, we went down to Sportsman's Warehouse to visit with the buyer. And usually whenever we'd visit the buyer, whether it's Sportsman's or whatever retailer, we want to visit some stores. And we usually ask the buyer, which stores should we visit? Who's really selling Vortex well? Because we want to almost interview them, hey, what are you doing? So he tells me this, we got to go see this one store and this John guy. He sells more Vortex than anybody in the whole company. So we go to the store and I meet this John guy, and he was a little shorter, but he kind of looked like Santa Claus, okay? Big beard. And so we get to talking, and finally I ask him, I say, okay, John, what's your secret? I hear you sell more Vortex than anybody. And I kid you not, he looks at me, and there may have been a twinkle in his eye, and he said, it's just that VIP warranty, Joe. I just tell them about the VIP warranty, and they're ready to buy. And of course, I still didn't get it. So I'm like, yeah, but John, but what about the edge-to-edge clarity and this, that, and the other features, benefits? And he's just like, hey, I don't know what to tell you. I just keep focusing on the VIP warranty. So then I get home, and I'm reading this book by some authors I really like, the Heath brothers. It's Switch, and it's this section in the book that's about bright spots. And they give some really cool stories about how to identify a bright spot and then lean into it. And they make a strong case that in most cases, you're not leaning into your bright spots, whether personally or in a business. And I'm reading this, and as I'm reading this, the conversation with my wife and the conversation with John are starting to bubble up, and I'm thinking, oh, wow. The bright spot for our business is the VIP warranty. The bright spot isn't necessarily what I want it to be. It's what it is. So then, right in my cube, I start looking around, I start looking at the catalog, and I'm flipping around, there's nothing on the VIP warranty. I look at our price list, same thing. I look at our showroom, I look at our counter mats and our POP signs and our banners, and I already know. There's no VIP warranty anywhere. I already know what our boxes look like, but I grab one just for kicks, and sure enough, all over the box, which sits out on the shelf, there's nothing about the VIP warranty. So in that moment, I thought, oh my gosh, it's full on VIP warranty. Like, we're not only gonna have a great warranty in reality, which we did, but we're actually gonna make that one of our biggest marketing tools. And so we did that right around maybe like 07, 09, somewhere in there, and we've just stayed the course. Now I'll say this, a couple other things is that over time, people can get bored even though the thing is working.
Right.
Or people can get enamored with, because we put so much effort into the quality of the optics, into the durability of the optics. So you want to talk about it.
Right.
So, and you can talk about it, obviously a little bit, but it's never gone out of style, this VIP warranty. We hear it all the time from customers and from dealers. That's why people choose us. So it was so not only is the VIP warranty important because customers know we always have their back, but it also has turned into our biggest marketing tool. And I think to the extent that we can get out of our own way and not get bored with it and continue to not only have a great warranty in practice, because we have guys and gals in the repair departments and return departments and who make sure that it turns around quick and that it's not just a good warranty in writing, but it's a good warranty in practice. But that was a really interesting experience for me to go through early on, and hopefully, like I said, we'll stay the course and keep the main thing being the main thing.
And you guys have grown 5x, 6x since then in terms of revenue?
So since then, it might even be closer to 10x.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this is a fascinating thing because, and I want to ask to talk about two different things, but again, really great to be able to walk around.
Right.
You guys have a wall where you've got the letters and you're reading the letters from people who've experienced this customer service.
Right.
And you figured out how to add a procedure or process, operationalize this insight that you had, which by the way, was hiding in plain sight, right?
Right.
And that started with your dad.
Yep.
And so if we can figure out how to touch on that part of it, one of the things I think you guys have done that's been powered by this original set of values, which I want to talk about next, but finding ways to be able to renew it. And I think, actually looking at that, it's not old if it's related to the person who just sent the letter, And that's something you guys do. You walk around, people are bringing those things up, you can see it on the wall, you're doing it, at the birthday party, and you're reading the letters and you're showing, and you're enabling and encouraging people to be able to lean into that. Super powerful, super powerful. But let's go back to the beginning and let's talk about where this, let's talk a little bit about your values in the business with your dad. And then, this is a family business.
Right.
And now it's an ESOP too, which is extraordinary. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Talk about that separately. But tell us about how that got started and where the sort of genesis of this approach was.
Well, I think one thing that will kind of explain that is if you go to our website, it's always been, and we've kept it this way, even though it can kind of be a little bit of a play on words, but usually you see an About Us section, but actually ours says About You. And the reason is my dad had always been, his thing is the golden rule, okay? And the golden rule is, never goes out of style, but sometimes we've heard it so much that you say the golden rule and people are like, and it just sort of glosses over. So our golden rule is it's the same golden rule, but we call it About You. So really, when you come to our website, when you come through our showroom, when you interact with us in some capacity, we want to make that experience all about you. So in that section, we'll eventually say, okay, now here's a little bit about us, because we know some people do want to know about who they're buying from. But really, our whole goal is to make this experience about you. And so that really has been a principle. And now, very, Christian, religious, spiritual family. And so they come from those, that is really the genesis, no pun intended, but that's the real genesis of it. But then it plays out in this situation from a business perspective. My dad would always say this, and he is an awesome guy, so hopefully this doesn't come out the wrong way. But we would go to maybe a restaurant and they'd have their first dollar on the wall, okay? Now, I actually think that's kind of cool. But my dad would say, that dollar should be in his office, because that dollar, does that make my burger taste good? It has no effect on how fast am I getting the food? How good does it taste? And initially as a kid, I thought, man, that's kind of harsh. But as I got older, I understood what he meant. What he really meant was, when somebody walks in, they're looking for a really great experience in this setting of a burger joint. They're looking for a really great server, at fast service, a really good burger or product. In other words, it should be all about them. And when you make it all about them, they are going to come back. They're going to tell their friends, and it's going to snowball. So one, he felt that was the right thing to do, number one, and he always makes a point of reminding me of that. Hey, you do it because that's the right thing to do. But it just so happens when you lean into doing the right thing, a byproduct is you get a customer for life. You get a walking, talking billboard for your business. So then about that about you, about us section, so we're always saying, hey, first and foremost, we have to look at this product, we have to look at this service, and we have to completely initially remove ourselves from it. What are they looking for? What are they looking for tangibly in a product, but what are they looking for also in the experience of it?
And this is a really powerful idea, because the other thing that you guys do is you make optics. Again, really handy to walk around. You go down to the factory floor, you talk to the super intense, super high quality, focus on excellence. We got to make this great thing. Totally different mindset in a way from thinking about optics and this very technical product as an experience. You keep saying experience. It's a product business. Well, it's actually not a product business, right?
Right.
No, or it's both.
So I think technically, we sell a product. So it's a product business. But I think if you were to go further upstream, it's like every business, in my opinion, it's a people business. And so, an example of where that might play out well would be, it used to be this way. Now, we've kind of been a catalyst for change, but as you would buy, let's say, a binocular, okay? And the binocular would be really good, but all the accessories that came with it were just throw-ins. They're just throw-in. Nobody would use that.
Dead strap, whatever.
Yeah, it was awful. And so you're kind of looking at this and you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, what's that experience like then? You open up, you bought this, $300, $1,000, whatever it is, binocular, and that's the rain guard, that's the objective, those objective covers, they actually aren't even usable because they don't attach to the binocular. And then you get a case, and the case would be well, this is a decent case if I'm going to pack it in a suitcase, but I don't want to pack it in. So we would look at all of those little things and think about it from the experience, though, of the consumer and say, okay, how do we get this so that this holistic experience of this product is good? And so that, you get a much better, more functional rain guard, objective covers. Now the case that it comes with is great by itself, but it also becomes a chest strap that you can use in the field. So that's kind of all of our people are wired around the person, even though their role might be a really technical role.
Yeah, and it's really interesting as you describe that. What comes to mind is Apple, which had the, beautiful packaging, expensive packaging. That whole experience of opening it up and everything
slow.
else.
Yeah,
right. It's but what's interesting about that is if you described Apple's culture, it is not what you just described as a culture here. You've arrived at the same place through two different ways, which is fascinating, but also this ability to think about people first, the golden rule in this context, has allowed you to make a series of choices along the way that have allowed this to scale. We were talking last night about some other famous examples of this. There's the person returning the snow tires to Nordstrom, and that story takes on a life of its own. It's certainly a Harvard case study about it, but a lot of people have talked about how that story propagates. USAA, one of the highest NPS scores. That's about being able to serve a community.
Right.
And you essentially have done something similar or along the same lines. And I think certainly in the case of USAA, and I'm not sure about Nordstrom, but certainly in the case of USAA, this is service. This is taking a group of service members who needed this product to serve them and their families. And then that is a true mission, right? People write missions all the time.
Right.
I'm just thinking of the different examples I've seen where, you're sitting in some conference room with your executive team, you're like, all right, we got to figure out the mission. And, it's this word jumble, and it's not necessarily somebody people are going to live with and live through.
Right.
And you guys did it this other way. And this really started by the fact that your dad started a different business and sort of found some of these components and then early on.
Yeah, so when he started, he was in Vietnam, did 3 tours, got the GI Bill, threw a dartboard at a bunch of respectable careers, landed on dentistry, became a dentist, found out he hated the dentist, being a dentist, okay? And my mom has frequented these Wild Birds Unlimited stores, and he didn't realize it at the time, but he turned out to be the consummate entrepreneur. I think I could do this, starts this Wild Birds Unlimited store. But from then, 86, all the way to now, 2025, with Vortex, you're like, how can you be the largest sport optics brand in the world, and you used to be a dentist, and then you had a Wild Birds Unlimited store? But if you follow the path, there are all these pivots that are based off of interacting with customers, listening to them, not only directly, but also in the subtext, and running small little experiments. And then when the experiment works, you lean into it. And so you kind of end up it's the same playbook again and again. Give me an example.
Right. Because this is really powerful, because I think your dad had some early examples in relatively small businesses.
Yeah.
And now you guys are big and you're still running those tests and those examples. So give me an example from the early days and a recent one.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to bookend it. So the first one is my dad opens a Wild Birds Unlimited store, and he notices a lot of people come in and they say, Dan, thanks for getting me the right feeder and the seed, but also I want to look at these birds. And sometimes I go on the walk and I want to look at these birds. And so there's no internet at the time in the 80s. And so he's sending people to camera stores, okay? And but after a couple months, he's kind of like, maybe I could sell these. And and of course he was a dentist, and then he became a Wild Birds Unlimited store owner. At the time, he had 3 young boys under the age of 7. He'd have a 4th with my mom. So it's like he knows he's got to make this work. Right. So he's looking for opportunities. So he's like, I think I could sell some of these binoculars. So he calls those brands up, which would way down the line end up being our competitors, and he asks if they'll open them up. And they laugh at him because, of course, they've never heard of Wild Birds Unlimited at the time. And they're like, do you sell birds? I'm not sending my rep out there. So he goes to this local store and he buys 12 binoculars, and he brings them back to his store, clears out a case, and he puts them in there and he marks them $1 over what he paid. Now, obviously, that's long-term strategy. That's not going to work out, but he's not worried about that. He's running an experiment. Can I actually sell these binoculars? Well, sure enough, a couple weeks go by, he sells every pair. So now he calls up those brands again, and he says, hey, since you wouldn't open me up, here's what I did and here's what happened. So of course they're kind of chuckling and they're saying, well, Dan, technically you violated every dealer agreement that we have. Right. However, impressive, I'm gonna send my rep out. So then the rep comes out, and long story long, he gets set up, and then he realizes, hey, in order to get the best pricing, I need to do more volume, so he starts a mail order company. So, but that's an example of running an experiment based off of feedback from retailers. Okay, so then let's do midterm and long term. So midterm, we launched Vortex, And we're mainly doing binoculars and spotting scopes because we kind of started more in the birding world. There's not really rifle scopes over there. So we're opening up all these hunting and shooting stores, and they're like, hey, love your products, love your service, love your warranty, your margins, all this stuff. But my biggest category is rifle scopes. When are you guys gonna get into rifle scopes? You've taken over my number one binocular line, spotting scope line, but I really need you in rifle scopes. So it's like, okay, like, we know optics. Granted, it's a little bit different optic. Our retailers are telling us this. We're already passionate about it. We've been hiring a bunch of hunting and shooting people in the business. And we could see where that's kind of where the inertia was going. So sure enough, we come out with rifle scopes in 2007, and I forget how long it took there, maybe 10 years, but it's our number one category now. Then you fast forward to probably 2020, 2021. We're having a dinner with a partner who's celebrating an anniversary. We're just, kind of small talking it. I'm asking what everybody's interested in. They're saying they're interested in golf. Then I ask what turned out to be a pretty silly question. I say, hey, when do golf rangefinders get popular? What time of year? Because I'm like, hunting is probably the bigger portion because that's what we're doing is hunting rangefinders, excuse me. And they look at me like I have a third eye in my forehead. They're like, golf rangefinders, way bigger than hunting.
Right.
And I'm like, really? And I'm like, because we got a lot of people passionate about golf inside the building. We're already doing rangefinders. We're already working with you. It's like fitting the whole kind of Venn diagram. And so sure enough, I'm embarrassed to say it. I'd love to tell you, we ran all this data and we did all this wonderful stuff, but it was a dinner. And so we just launched golf rangefinders. Now we did look after that dinner. We did a lot of research and a lot of data and all that. But we launched golf rangefinders last year, and we had a great first year, and it's growing now into year 2. So yeah, they're kind of these pivots, and I think a lot of them come directly, but some of them come in just indirectly or in the subtext or just by observing and being very curious and then leaning into an experiment. And all those experiments, by the way, they would have stung a little bit if they hadn't worked, but we didn't bet the farm on any experiment. So if those 12 binoculars would have never sold that my dad bought from American TV, that might have stung a little bit, might have cost $1,200 at the time, but Wildbirds Limited was still going. And then when we did rifle scopes, and then when we did golf rangefinders and all the stuff in between, we ran an experiment so we could really find out, hey, is this really gonna actually work? And it would have stung if it didn't, and there might be a few that didn't, but also we were able to figure out, is this something that we can add to our business?
Yeah. So a fundamental component of this is really making sure you're listening to what customers want and focusing on the customer. But your business actually, for reaching the customer, is B2B2C. You sell exclusively through dealers.
We do, correct.
Not distributors.
Yep.
And not direct to consumer.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about what's the how.
Yep.
In being able to take this idea of really listening, putting the other person first.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful idea, which was everywhere.
Right.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
How does that manifest in when you're thinking about dealers? What's the mechanism you guys use what's the how of getting customers to know about you if they haven't heard of you? Or, when they come in and they have a question, so what's the top of the funnel look like in terms of awareness, and what are you doing? And then what are you doing when they come into the shop?
So, a couple different things. One of the things I think to hit on what you're talking about is it was really pivotal that we were a retailer who then became a brand.
Yeah.
So
I was lucky.
Yeah. No, it was lucky. It was my dad knew it, so he did know it because he had been a retailer. So I'll give you an example. I'll do a kind of a short story. My first trade show out of college. It's in Salt Lake City. It's the Outdoor Retailer Show. So it's Imagine REI trade show, not a hunting show, REI. That crowd doesn't really buy a lot of optics. We didn't know that at the time. But so I'm about to go down there, and I'm like, hey, Dad, what's our spiel? Like I'm going to be talking to, and ignorance is bliss. I think I'm going to write 500 orders. And so he says, hey, we're gonna make a product and sell it at a price where the customer feels like they got a great value, better than what they paid for. Okay, that's awesome. The dealer's gonna make money. We go dealer direct. We don't go through distribution, so we can have an MAP policy, and then we can also get to know all of our retailers and have a really good experience. And then we're gonna have the best service before, during, after the sale. people know us because of our VIP warranty, but it's gonna be the holistic VIP experience. So he tells me that. I'm 22 at the time. I think he gives me the key to the city. I'm going down there and I'm like, I'm writing so many orders, my hand's gonna cramp up. So we get there and I went there with another guy. He's no longer with us. He's not dead. He's just no longer with us, but he set up the show. So we're walking all throughout the Salt Palace. We get to the end and there's a security guard woman working there and we can't find her booth. And so I say, hey, ma'am, we're looking for our booth and it looks like the show ends. And she goes, oh yeah. She goes, you're in the pavilion out back. And I go, what's a pavilion? And she goes, it's just a big tent. So there's no signs that even point to this place. So she opens up the security door. Sure enough, there's this giant tent. She goes, hey, here's the thing though. She goes, last year a tornado did rip through the pavilion, but the good thing is this year the weather looks great. So we get in the pavilion, the tent, we walk down, and it's like when you're getting on like an airline, and you're walking down and you're in 33B, and you're kind of like doing the math and you're trying to see who you're sitting next to, right? At least I do that, maybe you don't. And so I'm doing the math in my head and I'm like, our booth looks like it's gonna be way down on the left. And in this glorified tent, there's only one booth without any carpeting, and it's way down on the left. And I'm walking, I'm saying to the guy, did you get carpeting for the booth? Well, I'm sure I did. I'm like, I think that's our booth. No, that's not our booth. Anyway, sure enough, we get there, it's our booth. So we're at the whole show, we're in the back of the pavilion, the tent, and we have, just wood. We didn't have carpeting. And so I didn't write any orders that week.
That one.
So what I did though, is I was able to walk around, and I call them competitors because at the time we weren't competing with anybody. And I grabbed all their literature. And I'm going through their literature, and I'm like, son of a gun. They're saying it a little bit different, but there's, outside of no distribution, they're saying the same three things that Dad told me. And I'm fired up. I'm like, I thought he gave me this, secret sauce here, which it turned out he did. But, and so anyways, I get back and I go in his office and I kind of toss all the brochures down and I'm like, hey, they're pretty much saying the same things. Like, how are we gonna be different? And my dad, who's just world class at awkward silences, like it felt like it was like an hour, but it was probably like a minute. He finally smiles and he said, Joe, here's the thing. I've sold all those brands with all the literature there. They don't do any of that. They say they do it, but they don't. That's why we're starting what we're starting, because we're gonna do it. So he said, what's gonna happen is it's gonna take a long time, but eventually you're gonna get a dealer to write an order. And once they write an order and they work with us, they're never gonna wanna leave. They're gonna say, oh my gosh, you actually are doing the things that you say that you're gonna do. And he said, and eventually we're gonna get a second retailer and a third and a fourth. And eventually, and so I'm a big compound interest guy, is you take care of these dealers and these customers over time, and eventually it does snowball. Eventually the accumulation of all those, what we would call a C.A.R.E experience, it ends up and then you get that inflection point. And that really was, I saw it happen, I lived it, and it was interesting. I didn't even learn about the Flywheel until after the inflection point. So then when I hear about Jim Klein's Flywheel, I'm like, oh my gosh, we did this thing. This is legit.
So for the benefit of the audience, tell us about what the Flywheel is.
So Flywheel is, and I would argue, hopefully after you do this well enough, is you can start to think in flywheels. But the Flywheel is, you imagine a big giant disc, big heavy giant disc, right? And you come up to it and you push it and it kind of does this. It just moves a little bit. But the key is you don't stop. You keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and eventually you get one revolution, and one turns into two, into three. But imagine, you're continuing to push this thing. So eventually you keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Now it's 50 revolutions per minute, 100 revolutions per minute. Well, what are you creating? You're creating momentum. And that's hard to stop, right? You get all those revolutions. And then Jim used this really weird example, but it's really good. I don't know if the video's still online, but he goes, I want you to picture an egg. And he goes, I want you to picture an egg just sitting there. And he said, but all of a sudden the egg cracks and out pops a chicken. And then he goes, and then the Wall Street Journal and Forbes and everybody swoops in and they're like, oh my gosh, miraculous egg turns into chicken. And he said, but let's imagine it from the chicken's perspective. So the chicken is in this egg and it's growing over a long period of time, and then voila, the egg finally, and so that's what happens with a business, is eventually you hit that inflection point, and it's true. 2011 to 2013, people started to come and be like, Joe, I'm seeing Vortex everywhere. What did you do then? What did you do this year? That was the inflection point. And so we've certainly had catalysts all throughout our career, products, categories, hires, but really it was the accumulation of those principles and those strategies. And my dad was a world-class grinder. And so he turned this company into a world-class grinder, meaning we're great at Groundhog Day. We have those moments and we high five about them, but there's a lot of Groundhog Day in there. Just same day over and over. You know, the guys on the phones and emails, they're answering the same question. Different customer, different name, same question, but serving that person in a way that's really all about them. I don't know if I got off on a tangent. I'm even answering your question at this point.
No,
but
it's really powerful.
But it's really about the accumulation, and then again, the compound interest kicks in.
Yeah. So another thing you said, and I want to bridge this, because being able to be a grinder, there's a limit if you don't have a belief that underlies it. And I think there's a lot of evidence of this, right? But I think, and what's interesting about what you're describing is, at its core, you know, something else you said when we were talking before is really powerful, thinking about how people perceive people on the other end. And so, you know, we were talking about the warranty, which is not cheap to do, right? And, you know, you guys have super high quality stuff, but things go down. And frankly, you know, some percentage of the time has nothing to do with whether or not you built the product right. That's just the nature of it, right?
Right.
And there's a fundamental question of whether or not you believe the customer is trying to screw you, or do you believe that the customer is basically just trying to figure out how to get through? And occasionally you have that. And so talk a little bit about that, because I think there's an engine, you know, talking about the flywheel.
Right.
If you think that the retail and everybody else is just trying to beat you to hell, you can't, even if you start to turn it, you're not going to keep turning it, because it just feels bad.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about how you guys think about your customers.
So I'll kind of talk like a little top line, but then give some examples. So I think at the core, really the difference is, which might sound a little woo-woo, but then I'll give some examples, is an abundance mindset and a scarcity mindset, okay? And what happens a lot with people is they have an accidental scarcity mindset. And there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, human beings tend to over-index on negative experiences, okay? But then the other thing that people do is they immediately go to scale. So if they have a negative experience, they scale it. Or if they have an idea, they go to scale it. And
what do you mean you scale it?
Well, I'm gonna give you an example. Okay, so here would be an example. This is Wild Birds Unlimited. This is kind of this is maybe the origin of the VIP warranty story, even though the VIP warranty isn't in it. So at the bird store, my dad's in the back, and a guy comes in, he's coming after work, and he's got this mangled bird feeder. He comes in, and he's like, yeah, my wife said, you know, this bird feeder's junk, and we need a replacement or we need our money back. Our folks behind the counter are like, well, we've never sold that style of feeder. Well, the guy didn't buy the feeder, but he knows his wife said, and he's like, well, is there another bird store in town? I mean, where else should we have bought this? Bought it here, I need a replacement. Anyway, so this whole thing starts escalating. Meanwhile, there's people in the store and they're kind of like, ooh, this is getting weird, I might leave. Finally, the customer gets so upset, you know, I want to talk to the manager, the owner. So then at that point, they go and get my dad. My dad comes out, what's going on? The guy goes through his whole spiel again. He goes over, he grabs a new feeder and he says, here you go, sir, I'm really sorry that happened. Hands him a new feeder, walks out. The staff's like, Dan, we never sold that feeder, okay? And now he goes through the spiel, but one of his spiels that he went through is, there's a couple things going on here. One is if you're gonna do something, do it right away. Because when the guy got the feeder, he didn't walk around out happy. He was pissed. But he would have been happy if we'd given it right away. So there's a lesson there. But here's the other thing. What people are really saying when there's like, Dan, we don't even sell that feeder. You know what they're really doing is they're thinking, well, we can't do that for we're gonna have people, just a sea of people coming in, you know, one after another, and you can't scale that. That's unscalable. And here's the thing, they're right, you can't scale that. However, they're wrong, you're not going to get the sea of people. Right. No, and my dad called that the boogeyman. So what happens a lot of times when we have somebody who comes up with an idea is very well intentioned, somebody, usually if they're newer here, we can't do that. You can't scale that. You can't scale, like, when somebody sends in a picture of them and their daughter on their first hunt and she just got her first doe, you're gonna print that out and people are gonna sign a letter, a big card, and then you're gonna get a Vortex frame and you're gonna put that photo in and you're gonna mail it off. I mean, what if every customer does that? But here's the thing, not every customer is gonna do it. But when you do that, you create a story, and you said it earlier, and guess what? The story scales. So if you want to talk about scale, you're still talking about the Nordstroms with the snow tires. And you give a really heartfelt story about USAA 35 years later. Yeah. So sometimes people get too enamored, and I'm not trying to say scale isn't important. It's a component. But
well, you said the most important part, which is you want to scale the story, not the.
You want to scale the story.
Activity. The other thing that I think is powerful about this, and I just want to call it out because, definitely we have folks who will listen to this and go, you know what, I don't have as much room. Yeah. One of the things you guys did that was really smart, and I don't want to make light of it because you made some room in margin in the fact that you guys have map pricing.
Yep.
Like that you guys did a couple things because, you guys were smart to make sure that you could reap the benefit of that story, right?
Yeah.
I had a retailer a couple companies ago, and we had a real challenge around this because we had a business that was reselling other brands, and we were essentially a discount clearinghouse. We were able to help them clear excess inventory. And the original model, when it got going, was start off no returns, and then we would take a return, but you had to pay for shipping. And the original model was also consignment. Like we didn't necessarily take on the inventory risk because we really grew, extremely fast. I mean, we grew 40,000% in like 4 years, but it started really in the depths of the Great Recession where people were like, you help me get rid of this, that's great. But then the market conditions change. But the big thing that made that business difficult, even though we grew, to a couple $100 million business, 1.5 million customers or whatever, is that the market power of the brands meant that our margins were getting compressed slowly. And so our ability to be able to offer, we just couldn't make the math work in terms of getting it to go. But again, there's this question of whether or not, can you put in enough of a foundation and then this is a multiplier. Mm-hmm. I'll never know. If I had met you, 15 years ago when we were talking about this, maybe we could have figured out a way to be able to drive more frequency of purchase or something to be able to make it work. But at its core, you did two really critical things early, right? Which is you didn't deal with distributors. You're able to maintain map pricing, which meant that you had dollars to not only take care of the dealer, but also to be able to have the dollars to put out a high quality product.
Right. So so I'm glad you hit on that, and I'll share another. I think it's a fairly quick story, but it's very interesting. So we were a retailer. We were mom and pop at the Wild Birds Unlimited level. Eagle Optics was a mail order e-tailer. So we kind of had that experience. But I remember when we started Vortex, we still owned Wild Birds Unlimited, we still had Eagle Optics. And Eagle Optics and Vortex were in the same.
Oh, that's interesting.
In fact, actually, during Christmas, it got so busy that we had phones that would pop up and tell you who was calling. So sometimes you'd be Vortex and sometimes you'd be Eagle Optics. You only had like 20 people in the business. So, and we also had a shared fax machine. Okay, this is back when the real faxes were coming through. So, and sometimes so many would come through that something would fall on the floor. So I'm walking through our copier room / birthday party / meeting room / everything, and I walk by and there's this fax on the floor. So I pick it up and I look at it, and it's a fax that are buyers from Eagle Optics to a competitor that I won't name, and it's $50,000. And we had just, I mean, it's a good order still, but we had just started Vortex. The biggest order I had was $2,200. I remember it. And I was so naive, I thought we should have taken the whole company out on a steak dinner. We would have lost money. But so I see a $50,000 purchase over there, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, no way. So I go back to the buyers. I'm like, hey, guys, this is probably not something you want to be leaving out like a thing of trash on the floor. And they're like, oh, that? Yeah, we've sent that in like 4 or 5 times over the last 3 or 4 weeks. We don't even know if they've got it. Confirmation, is it on the way? And I remember thinking then, I was like, oh gosh, we're so far behind these guys. but it's only a matter of time till we catch them. Because if I had gotten a $50,000, I would have driven it to their building. I mean, I would have rolled out a red carpet and gotten like people playing trumpets. But I asked my dad about that, and he goes, yeah. He goes, you know why that is? He goes, they have contempt for their dealers. So the dealers are just a means to an end. That's what they were.
Yeah.
And he knew it because he was one. They didn't really care about the dealer. They just knew they had to use them. And so that was kind of one of our superpowers is like, hey, we're going to be great for the end consumer, but these dealers are going to be our partners. We're going to lean into this great, and we're not going to look at them with contempt. We're not going to look at them like you're just a means to an end. You know, so you're right. So when you get to the margin piece, so the margins were terrible for dealers back then. There was no strong MAPL policy, and if there was, the margins stunk because they didn't have an appreciation for these retailers who were actually the mouthpieces for their brand. And they were inventorying it and, you know, doing all this work on their behalf, and then they were making these just pitiful margins. So you're right, we leaned into what I would say was a more holistic, you know, way of serving the whole chain. And that, I think that's really served us well even, you know, to today.
And you weaved in something else which is really important, which is this idea of contempt.
Yeah.
You know, not necessarily related to business, but we'll talk about it, how it's all the same thing ultimately. But there's this marriage researcher. Have you heard this?
So I have.
Okay.
It's the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Right.
And the worst one?
Contempt.
Yeah.
So for our audience, it's,
Yes.
you know, if you want to stay married, this guy, this is
The Gottmans.
The Gottmans, exactly.
yeah.
So they can,
So funny.
they can watch 20 minutes of video of you and your wife
And know.
or your partner and know within like 95% whether or not you're going to be together in 5 years.
Right.
And it's because they're looking for these micro expressions that are associated with the 4 horsemen. But by far the most important is respect and its counterpart, contempt. And it's interesting because, you know, all of these connections, all of these relationships, which is the foundation of what you're describing, experience and connection and relationships across the chain to the customer, to this is about what are those relationships like? Forget about the product a minute.
Right.
And you know, and you know what? Your wife will break up with you if you treat her with contempt, and so will the dealer.
Well, and so if we can lean into this marriage thing in the Gottman, so it's funny, we actually recently just talked about this very thing, so it's so ironic that you bring it up. So one of the other things too, so that's a big piece, is to not have contempt, have that respect. But another thing that's big in the marriage relationship and the Gottmans talk about is those bids for connection. So, and that is a bid for connection is somebody says something like, oh, I saw an owl today. And of course, you know, if you're, oh yeah, that's interesting, honey, thanks, you know. Or you can say, really, you saw an owl? That's kind of rare. Where'd you see it at? You lean into it, that because she's doing, in this example, a bid for connection. Well, your customers and your retailers do those all the time. Sometimes they're overt or they ask you just point blank. But a lot of times, like in that example where the guy sends in his photo of him and his daughter, and he says, oh, thank you for helping me find the right Crossfire rifle scope. And I took my daughter out and she got her first doe. And he emails that. That's a bid for connection. So you can just say, oh, isn't that nice, and file that email, or you can lean into it. Right. And you can say, oh, what can I write him back? How can I elevate this moment? Because clearly this moment's important to him. I mean, he took time out of his day to email me and put the photo in there. And
email, but to be clear, email a company. They don't know. I mean, some, you know, like that's I
mean, you don't do that very often.
Right.
And so, when somebody does that, you have to like lean into the moment. And here's the other thing. If it's a big deal for your customer or your dealer, in our case, both, it should be a big deal to you.
Right.
So if it's not a big deal to you, it's like you kind of have to look in the mirror a little bit.
Totally. Why are you in the business?
Just like you would with your spouse, right?
That's exactly
you know, like
right.
gosh, you know, I'm just looking at my phone. I could care less. You know what she says. That's probably not good.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So let's talk about something else that you guys have. So to take this first part, you guys had a foundational approach to the business.
Yep.
That had a set of values and principles from your dad. You've been able to take them, you know, your dad was a very successful entrepreneur, but built a business that was this big.
Yep.
And then in turn, you, with the family has figured out how to make it this big. And you guys have taken the same process, right? Which is this, here's a set of values, we're gonna apply them again and again.
Yep.
there's going to be a benefit from it. I mean, one of the things that's been fun, because we had a little time to spend together, is that this clearly feeds you. You know, feeds your soul. You meet the folks in the building. They love what they do. It's part of this, and you guys have made a series of interactions in the company in these different areas where people are part of this, but it's because every day you get a little bit of benefit from it. And as you pointed out in our previous conversations, you're hiring people who that actually feels good to. If that doesn't work for you, you don't work here. It doesn't matter what your resume says.
Right.
So you found a group of people who are empathetic, who get joy out of helping people. You know, they're driven by that, and then you figured out how to institutionalize that and be able to scale with this foundation of a business that had the margin structure and the approach. So, okay, so here we are, and you've been able to figure that out. Let's talk about another initiative that you're working on, which is this Create a Rare Experience initiative.
Sure.
Which is taking this to others.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our, just kind of, high level it, and then we're kind of down into the nitty gritty. So our vision here is to be the catalyst that improves the world through service. So we want to improve the world, and service is the way that we do that, by serving other people. We don't think it's subservient, we think it's a strength, and it's our strength. It's gonna be our superpower. And how we do that is by creating a rare experience, or this C.A.R.E thing. So the what's rare, so it's all about being a personalized, human, unique, memorable experience that we give one-to-one to another person. And there's another way to kind of sum up what the rare component is, and that's this connection creates momentum. So we're trying to have an authentic connection with the customer who calls in, who visits our showroom, or the dealer. And not is everyone. Sometimes somebody calls up and they just want to know what the close focus is, and then they're going to get off the phone. We get that. But to the extent that we can, we want to connect authentically to other people, and we feel like, and to our employees, and we feel like we've done a really good job of that. We're not perfect, but we've done a good job of that, and we feel like that's fueled us to be a successful business to the extent that we can then pour out to our employees and to our customers and to our dealers. So it's been this, it's like a cascading thing of, and we really think the world would be better off if more people did it that way. They don't have to call it C.A.R.E. I don't care. I like that, but I'm more about them really taking that on. And what it's been for us is it's been a momentum builder internally for people who work here, me personally, but it's also been a momentum builder on our bottom line. So there's a duality here. They're interconnected.
Say more about that.
Yeah. So the first part though is we do it because we feel like it's the right thing. We do it because how we're wired. This is who we are. Okay. And it just so happens the byproduct of that is you get loyal employees and loyal customers who go. One of the favorite phrases that we get from our customers, our dealers, is above and beyond. Everybody goes above and beyond for each other, for the customer, and the customers do it on our behalf. So it really is, connection does create momentum. And whenever I talk to somebody and I say, hey, you know what it's like to have momentum? You know what it's not like to have momentum? Everybody nods their head. We know what it's like on the balance sheet, but I'm not really talking about that yet. I'm talking about what's it like momentum-wise, because a lot of people have worked at companies that are printing money successful. They're not doing so hot, okay? Not for very long anyways. And so what we're trying to do.
The person's not doing so hot.
The person's not doing so hot. Yeah, the company and the bottom line might be.
Doing great.
But there's a ton of disillusioned people that are working at companies that are making a lot of money. In fact, a lot of them are, the person's making a lot of money. But they're kind of, this is sort of soulless work, and I'm purely doing it based off of just the bottom line. Well, I think that we've leaned into principles, and principles are timeless. And I love timeless stuff. Because if you can lean into something that's timeless, quite frankly, it's easier, okay, than have to reinvent the wheel all the time.
Right.
And when I look in the mirror at night, I can feel really proud about what we've done as a team and how we've served other people. But then also, I've seen the fruits of it on the bottom line. Now, you've got to have a longer term lens. It's going to be harder for somebody to implement this if they're like the quarter. We look at the quarter. The quarter is important. But it's not the be-all, end-all. If you've got a long-term lens and you're willing to lean into principles of serving other people, and you've got good common sense, Okay, so you gotta find out how you're gonna do it. It's gonna look a little bit different than Vortex, but principally based, it can be the same. I think the extent is you're gonna make the world a better place, okay? You're not gonna talk to a single person, you're not gonna convince me you're gonna talk to somebody who's ever been a customer and say, I'm gonna get better service from a real human being who's empowered to help me, and the world's not gonna get better. That's gonna make the world a better place. You're gonna be happier, you're gonna be more fulfilled, and again, it's gonna show up on the balance sheet. And it's gonna show up in a way where you're gonna get positives initially, but it's gonna show up more in the compound interest. It's gonna show up more in the flywheel effect, where you're just pushing on that big giant flywheel and you're getting 1 revolution and 2 revolutions and 3. So what we wanna do is we think we're fulfilling our vision to be the catalyst that improves the world through service by reaching out to other businesses or showing them how to do it in a way that in our space has taken us from zero, a booth in Salt Lake City that was in a tent with no carpeting, to be the largest sport optics business that's ever been. And we were 100 years late to the game. I mean, I think like early 1905, 1906 was the first optics company. So we were 100 years late to the game, and we've been able to scale that to the #1, and I think the highest that it's ever been for a single company, which is great, but I'm more proud of how we got there.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think something we were talking about too is efficiency.
Yeah.
And so there's no question
Right.
that I would imagine no small number of our listeners are going to be like, there is a way to do it more efficiently. And the answer is, depending on how you measure that, it's axiomatic that that's true. But this question of particularly we're talking about being able to impact people outside the frame of this building or within the company and being able to have them, essentially you're making a lot of little flywheels spinning, right? They're gonna now act through reciprocity, but also just because that's how humans are built.
Right.
There's something really powerful about that. I wanna just take a moment more on this because one of the things we know, this type of approach is easier for a founder, an owner, a CEO to decide, you know what, I'm gonna invest in this over time. And actually, interestingly, it also depends on the nature of their cap table, right? I mean, if you're on the hook to be able to figure out how to do this quarter after quarter, by the way, I don't think anybody who hears this is gonna go, well, I don't buy that. Right, because they're human. Of course, they've had those experiences, they get it. And then there are a number of pressures that are happening for all these folks too, where you're just like, okay, that's fine, but how do I actually take this and find a way if I'm an executive or somebody who's in charge of an area? And one of the things that I want to come back to is what you had talked before about is there are ways to find experiments and then amplify them in such a way that it can be viral. And I think the counterfactual to the fact that, frankly, there isn't a lot of dispute that AI is going to change customer service completely. And, you can do even a lot of things we're talking about, even though it's not a human because it's going to get trained by a human and has the ability to be able to grab all this, could deliver a lot of what we're describing if you design the bot correctly, basically. So there's a series of things that are going to happen that are going to make efficiency possible. And there's going to be enormous pressure on all of our businesses in different ways. But within that, one of the things you guys have done is you figured out how to operationalize parts of it to start to, and then to amplify it. And the other thing that's going on is you guys have a big influencer following, but you also have customers who are amplifying your message for free, essentially.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a way to quantify that and talk about that, and it's obviously been an essential part. So, and I'm probably not doing it justice, but I just want to point out, let's take a moment to talk about, all right, we have a CMO or a head of growth or a CFO,
right,
who goes, I get this, I agree. What are a couple of things that you could say as first steps to some initial case studies or some proof points that they could try to begin to get this thing to turn?
Well, okay, a couple of things. And I believe that I first read this study in The Power Moments by, again, the Heath brothers. I'm a big fan of their work. But one of the things they did is there was a study that they cited about going to Disney World. And they had people rank their experience all along the different touch points of their Disney World vacation from 1 to 10, okay? And then they averaged all those up, and they got an average, and it was like a 6 point something out of 10. I mean, not that great.
Not that great.
But then what they did is they asked them to rate their trip. So not every little thing, rate their trip, and their trip was like a 9.1. And what they found was, that it was this, partly why you get the name of the book, Power Moments, is they had 9.1 or thereabouts experiences, moments along the way. And that was their takeaway of what their trip was. So, waiting in the bus got, maybe a 5 or something like that to get from the airport over to Disney. So I think one of the things that people should do is do an audit of the touch points that they have with their customer, okay? And because what you're gonna find is there are moments where you should probably lean into efficiency. Let's make this the most efficient, because that's not where the 9 experience needs to be. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. For us on the phones and emails, like when you call in Vortex or you email in or you chat in, you need to get a real human being who knows what they're talking about, who's empowered to help you right away. That's a big touch point. When you look at all these letters that people send us in or emails they in, they're just over the top about their experience with Vortex. They're always talking about the people that are connecting when they first come in. Now this is a little bit of like, the easiest example is like when you turn on the lights, like that should be efficient, okay? Like, right? I don't want guys on hamster wheels in the back that start running to get my lights turned. Like you want the lights to turn on when you want them to turn on. When you want to buy a product shipped out, okay, you want that to be a fairly efficient process. Now, where it gets a little nuanced in there is somebody calls up, their product's broke, and they're on their hunt. And they're in Idaho, and they're 45 minutes away from Pocatello. Well, they spent $7,500 on their hunt, and they're out there, and their father's out there, and it's probably gonna be his last hunt because he's not doing so well. What are you gonna do? Okay, all right, well, you better get to work. Right. What dealer do we have in Pocatello? Right. Do they already have that? Can they mount and bore sight it? And what can we do to do the dealer a solid and either have them drive up, or maybe they can make that 45-minute drive down to make it happen, okay? That's completely inefficient.
Right.
But I'd argue it's effective, okay? Because what you're really trying to do is serve that customer. Well, so you need to be able to, there needs to be flexibility in there, but I would say when you do the audit, find those moments that are the key moment, and then focus on making that the moment that they'll remember.
And you can make an argument that it's extremely efficient at taking something that actually is, by its core, the action of resolving it is super inefficient, but what it creates is an extremely efficient way to be able to potentially get a projection into the other, where that person's never gonna forget that, and then that's gonna pay off.
Yeah.
And so on. This comes back to the great story about the bird feeder, which is fix it quick, so you get the other benefit out of it.
You do.
And I think that's really powerful. What you said about customer service, and I want to make a distinction here, and it's something we see in our business, Violet Growth, is your folks who are answering the phones are experts not only in the products, but they're actually experts in the thing that you're doing. They're expert hunters, they're expert bow hunters, or they're really good at whatever. And you know what? They'll talk to you about that. Yeah. You don't have to.
All day long.
All day long.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, in our Violet Growth business, which is analytics essentially, we help companies be smarter, at least that side of the business does that. But when you talk to somebody who is helping you with, quote, customer success, what they're really helping you do is figure out how to use the tool to get the benefit, as opposed to, I'm gonna show you how to use the feature. And I think that's a fundamental thing, because it's end-to-end. What you're describing here is that long chain service thing that doesn't have a bound on it, right? It's interesting, this efficiency thing, and there's a lot of evidence of this, which is, people do how you measure them. That they're going to work to the goal that you define, right? You design the game, and then they're going to act that way. And so if you have a thing where it's like, the way we're measuring you is how many minutes you spend on the phone with a person, it has to be at the expense of something.
Well, let me lean into that a little bit, because so here's one thing is that understanding a customer or a dealer. I'm going to use a dealer as an example. So and I'm going to use efficiency or maybe being versus effective. And like you said, sometimes you can reverse engineer it and argue it's both. But so what a lot of people will do is they will design a order form. Okay. Yep. And the order form, it's the greatest order form since sliced bread. They can't screw it up, and when they send it in, the beauty is it just goes right into the system. Nobody has to transcribe it, nobody can fat finger anything, so there's no mistakes, right? But here's the thing, we built it to serve us. We would never say that. We're gonna say we built it to serve them, okay? But it's really to service us and make our life easier, okay? All right, now let's look at that from the retailer's perspective. That's actually okay to have an order form, okay? I'm not arguing against that, and that feeds right into the system. But let's look at what a mom and pop retailer job looks like, okay? So they're maybe doing top line $1 million, $2 million a year. They have a bunch of part-time employees, okay? The owner is full-on practitioner. It might be the top sales guy, might be the janitor, is the accountant. I mean, has all these hats. Have you ever walked into their office? It's like mail exploded over the past 10 years, right? They have so much on their plate, and that guy might want to write an order on a napkin and say, here you go. Oh, thanks, John. But actually, we made this really great order form, and if you could just put that on there, because if the napkin, I might make a mistake, someone might make a mistake, or you just say, thanks, John, really appreciate it. Yeah. Okay, now here's the thing. What if you make a mistake? Well, then make it right. John understands there's mistakes. I just told you about what his life's like. You think mistakes happen in a place like that? They do. But he's going to be more interested in how you handle the mistake. And here's the thing. You maybe didn't make a mistake, but don't argue it. Don't argue it. Just say, I'm sorry that happened, John. We're going to make it right. Okay, so then here's what happens. Here's what happens with John. John's got a bunch of vendors across a bunch of different categories. Who do you think he's going to funnel more orders to? He's going to funnel it to the one that makes his life easiest. In fact, he's going to love that company, okay? Right. But the thing is that if you're so focused and hardwired on making this process that everybody else you ham jam everybody in there, do you think that they don't know that? He knows you're just ham jamming them into your process. And people hate that. So when people do an audit, they need to be really careful. Yeah, have the path that 80% of the people are going to take, but be willing to deviate on some of those other people. I can't tell you how many times there's things companies will have that you have to fill out a form. And you have to fill it out a certain way, and there's only so many characters in that text box that you can fill out. Yeah. And right? And they're thinking they're serving people, but what they don't is they're pouring hot coals on the heads of their customers. And their customers are just waiting for a better alternative. And as soon as it shows up, do you think there's any loyalty? No, because I didn't get to be me. That's what customers want. Customers are busy. They're busy. They're dropping kids off at things, they're picking them up, they're coordinating schedules, and they're doing all this work, and they want somebody to make their life easier. Yeah. And so that's where sometimes the efficiency screws people up, is they're so focused on efficiency at the detriment of the customer. Because the efficiency is about them. Their policy is about them. The process is actually about them. It's not about the customer.
Right. And at the end of the day, if you focus on the customer, which we all know intuitively you want to do, what you're describing is a very specific way, is you actually drive real loyalty, and then you drive that follow-on sale.
Yes.
I want to end on something that I thought was really funny, but also very wise that we talked about last night, which was the fact that you hate the idea of work-life balance.
Yeah, I definitely have to unpack that. So I know what most people mean when they say that is they want to have a thriving life outside of work, and I fully support that. Okay, I fully support that. But I think words are important. I think framing is important. And when you frame it as work-life balance, first of all, I don't agree with it. It's all just life. okay? It's all just life.
Right.
Okay, so it's life at work and it's life at home, okay? So you're framing it already in a poor way. And I would also argue it usually in those conversations or in those articles you read, they're framing work as bad. They're framing work as though you gotta get away from it. That life starts at 5 p.m. and ends, at 10 p.m. when you go to sleep. Or a life kicks in on the weekend. And boy, I'll tell you what, I ran the numbers. It's 90,000 hours. 90,000 hours for an adult. That's how many hours they're gonna spend at work. I mean, I think it behooves all of us to optimize those 90,000 hours, okay? Yeah, I wanna have a thriving life at home with my wife and kids and friends, absolutely. But I want a thriving life at work. I just don't wanna be work to have be a means to an end. And I think there's a way that you can do it even if you're not in charge, even if you're not the founder or the CEO. And that's this phrase that we talked about last night, which is connection creates momentum. So if I go to work, and yes, I gotta do a good job, I gotta do the X's and O's of my job and get that right. But if I go to work and I focus on connection, I can create momentum. I can create momentum for you because I'm really gonna try to serve you as my coworker, my customer well. And when I do that well, I'm gonna actually create momentum for me. And as we talked about, as we've seen with our business as a case study, you're gonna create momentum eventually for the bottom line. So I think that is the way that you can optimize it, because you might be in a job that technically, yeah, you didn't grow up dreaming to be X, Y, or Z job, right? So 100% agree if someone's like, I'm stuck in this job, I don't even really care about the products that we sell. Well, that's okay. Like, I get it. And we hope you get maybe to a different one. But in the meantime, just focus on connecting with other people, authentically connecting, authentically serving other people. And you're really gonna create momentum. You're gonna create a thriving work environment, and you're gonna be able to create momentum for everybody involved. So yeah, work-life balance, to me, throw that term out if it was on me. Have a thriving life outside of work, but also try to optimize those 90,000 hours, because if you don't, boy, that's a pretty dreary existence. That's a lot of hours to be just doing a means to an end to pay for your real life outside of work.
100%. And I think the other thing that's happened is, in the time that you guys have been building this business, but certainly what we're coming into in this next phase over the next 5 to 10 years, and certainly what we've been dealing with social media and how people are active online, and the fact that anything can blow up really fast, good or bad, right? Those engines are the engines for this big lift. We spend a lot of time thinking, in our business, and we talk to a lot of folks on All Dots Connected about those moments where things were stuck and the way they found their way through. And I think you're really pointing out something incredibly important, which is authenticity derived from, actually being truly authentic, as opposed to trying to manufacture it, which doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work.
You get authenticity, and you have a way to be able to project that by finding those moments that can be projected, that resonate. That actually is an enormous growth lever.
Let me share one story, because I know we're kind of coming to the end, but I want to share this story because I think it hits right on what you said. And we just wrote about this recently on social media. So I'm a young manager, okay, and probably mid-20s, and we have a guy who's great with customers. He's been with us 10 years, and he loves customers. He makes them feel seen, valued, important. He knows the product. I mean, he's just great, right? But he starts having some personal life issues that are happening, okay? And it's starting to affect his work. Like, he's not showing up, he's late. So he's really not pulling his weight. He's letting down the team. And it's gotten to the point where I've talked to him a little bit, but I'm gonna have to have a bigger conversation, okay? So I go to my dad, which I often did and I still do, and I say, hey, I'm gonna be talking with this guy. We'll call him Jim, that's not his name. And I say, I gotta have a really difficult conversation with him. We gotta get him on, the straight and narrow. But in the midst of all this, I want him to know that I really care about him. And so my dad kind of leans back and he says, well, when's the meeting? And I go, what's tomorrow? And he goes, okay, move it back a week. And I'm like, okay. And I've got my legal pad, and so I'm like, move it back a week, step one. And he goes, okay. He goes, here's what I want you to do. And I'm like, okay, he's like, all right. He goes, so when you're driving to and from work, I just want you to think about Jim. What's he going through? What's going on in his life? Maybe why this is coming up. And then when you're at lunch, I want you to think about Jim. And then when you're here, and he goes, basically every little free moment you have for the next week, I want you to really think about Jim, because you know some of the stuff that's going on with them. And I'm like, okay, think about Jim. I think it's like we're step 2 of a 10-step process. And then he goes, and he goes, and when you get to that place where you just really, really care deeply about Jim. And I'm like, yeah. And then he goes, well, then you go have the meeting. And I go, wait, like what? No, but like what? Okay, I'm gonna have the meeting, but then what? And he goes, no, here's the thing, Joe. He goes, it's not about tactics. He goes, when you really get to a place where you authentically care about somebody, he goes, it's just gonna come through. It's just gonna come through naturally. And he goes, and then you don't have to think about the tactics. Look them in the eye, shake their hand a certain way, position yourself, here maybe as across from, because that's more common. He said, it's just gonna come through. And he said, so the key to get somebody to know that you care about them is to, in fact, actually care about them.
Right.
So that's what I would say in all the stuff that we do. I want people to know that it does affect positively the bottom line. But I think there's kind of a fork in the road where you have to take and say, do I really care about these principles? Do I really care about people? Am I really all in on that? And if you're all in on that, you trust that process, the end result is you're gonna get the bottom line stuff that you need to get, but you really have to decide, am I somebody who really cares about somebody? Am I really somebody who cares about doing business this way and serving people?
Thanks so much, Joe.
Yep, thank you, appreciate it.